Well, our next guest was part of President Biden's transition security team after the 2020 election and was directly involved in the security plans for the inauguration, working hand in hand with law enforcement. John Cohen, former acting undersecretary for intelligence at the Department of Homeland Security and ABC News contributor now, says he too is just learning more about what actually conspired at the Capitol through the hearings, and that your team, John, was never made aware of what was going to happen on January 6th, even though all signs point to the fact that members of the White House did. Let's talk about this. As you were watching the hearing and listening to all of this with us yesterday, I noticed your reaction when you heard the testimony from those extremist groups, the members of the extremist groups. What caught you by surprise?
Well, there's really two things that caught me by surprise. One, I was pleasantly surprised by how clearly the committee has been able to draw a linkage between the events that occurred on January 6th at the Capitol and the linkages with the violent extremist threat facing the U.S. today. They were very clear in their presentation regarding how content being placed on social media or shared through mainstream media can be consumed by angry, disaffected people and inspire them to engage in destructive and violent activity. The second area that surprised me, which was an unpleasant surprise, is in the way that the committee continues to build its case that January 6th was not a spontaneous, unanticipated event, but it was part of an orchestrated plan. And that planning included individuals who were part of the former president's inner circle and may have actually included people who were working in the government at the time. And you know, this is really an uncomfortable area for me because as I had asked questions in the past about what I had identified as gaps in our security planning on January 6th, and why law enforcement organizations were not better prepared for something that I think was easily anticipated. It was always explained, well, we could never have conceived of this. We didn't know what was going to happen. But now we're hearing the committee at least raise concerns that there may have been people in the government who not only were aware of the plans, but involved in developing them.
So the testimony actually proved that Trump, as you just mentioned, and his inner circle knew exactly what was going down and could have actually warned Capitol Police about the insurrection before it happened. So why did you never receive any warning? I mean, was this an intelligent failure or not? Because that's what the administration was claiming.
Look, there certainly were issues with regard to how individual intelligence and law enforcement organizations gathered and incorporated information that was readily available into security planning. And there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered about who exactly in the White House was aware of the plan for people to march on the Capitol and whether those concerns or those plans were ever conveyed to Secret Service leadership. But it has never made sense to me, that the planning for that day, the security planning for that day, solely focused on the event at the Ellipse, that there was not better information sharing going on between federal, state, and local authorities, that local law enforcement officers from neighboring jurisdictions were not pre-positioned or pre-staged, why there wasn't a larger law enforcement presence at the Capitol. You know, we have always sort of had that explained to us as, again, we didn't know that there was going to be a march on the Capitol, but now the committee is suggesting that people did know there was going to be a march on the Capitol and that march was part of a plan to disrupt the certification. So there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered in my mind.
And now former Oath Keepers spokesman Jason Van Tatenhove and fellow rioter Stephen Ayers both testified to the planning of the insurrection and now say they regret it. Let's take a listen.
What is the Oath Keepers' vision for America, and why should Americans be concerned about it?
I think we saw a glimpse of what the vision of the Oath Keepers is on January 6th. It doesn't necessarily include the rule of law. It doesn't necessarily include, it includes violence. It includes trying to get their way through lies, through deceit, through intimidation, and through the perpetration of violence. The swaying of people who may not know better through lies and rhetoric and propaganda that can get swept up in these moments. And I'll admit I was swept up at one point as well, too.
So, John, what does the committee need to do now with this understanding? And does this testimony tell us that the threat of extremism is actually getting worse?
Yeah, the threat's not gone. In fact, I would argue it's more volatile, more complex, more dynamic than it was even prior to January 6th. And I say that because we still see public figures, some elected officials, those in the media, continue to promote the exact same narratives that led to the events on January 6th. We are seeing that actually more people today believe those narratives, those false narratives that the election was stolen, than did prior to January 6th. And we continue to see on violent extremist forums, including those that promoted content calling for violence on January 6th, continuing their calls for violence and saying it should be directed at law enforcement, at Republicans in Congress, at Democrats in Congress, at state election officials. So as we enter into the 2022 election cycle, law enforcement is concerned that the threat environment is going to be highly dangerous.
Well, we'll stay on top of it. John Cohen, thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.